This is Eleanor Voss at Still Point Institute, and today we are going to have the conversation that nobody in this space is willing to have directly with women. Not because the truth is cruel, but because the truth is inconvenient for a culture that has spent decades telling women that whatever goes wrong in a marriage is the man's fault, that their feelings are always valid regardless of the behavior those feelings produce, that walking away is empowerment rather than the financial and emotional catastrophe it so frequently turns out to be. Nearly 50% of women in the United States are currently single, divorced, or widowed. A significant portion of those are women over 50 who left marriages that provided them with a standard of living they have been unable to replicate on their own. Women who believed that independence on the other side of divorce would look like freedom, who discovered too late that it looks like financial stress, isolation, a dramatically reduced standard of living, and the particular anguish of realizing that the man they left would never have left them. This is not a small number of women. This is a generation of women sitting with consequences they did not anticipate because nobody told them honestly what the other side of that decision would actually look like. Because telling women difficult truths has become culturally impermissible in a way that telling men difficult truths never has been. So today I am going to be impermissible. I am going to tell women the truth, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the kind of calm, clear honesty that women who are still in salvageable marriages actually need to hear before they make irreversible decisions. And I am going to do it as a woman. Because when a woman says these things, you cannot dismiss them as bitterness or misogyny. You simply have to sit with them. Here is the foundational reality that so many women genuinely do not understand. When a good man gives his commitment to a woman, he gives it with the intention of staying permanently. The statistics bear this out directly. 65 to 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Men are not the ones walking away from marriages in large numbers. Men are largely the ones being left, which means the destruction of most marriages in this country is being driven primarily by female behavior and female decisions. That is not a comfortable truth, but it is a true one. Here are the 7 specific ways women destroy their men and their marriages. Not as an attack, as a mirror. Look honestly at what reflects back. The first way is expecting him to read your mind and punishing him when he cannot. The single most common communication failure in marriages is the expectation that a man should know what you need without being told. That he should anticipate your needs, recognize when something is bothering you, understand instinctively what you want him to do differently, and adjust his behavior accordingly, all without a direct conversation about any of it. This is not romantic. This is a trap. Here is what actually happens. You have a need that is not being met. You notice he is not meeting it. Rather than telling him directly, you wait for him to figure it out. He does not figure it out because he is living his life and not perceiving what you are perceiving. Your frustration builds. You become distant, short with him, quietly resentful. He senses the change but does not understand the source. He asks if something is wrong. You say nothing or you say you should know. And now you have a conflict rooted entirely in an expectation he was never given the opportunity to meet. Men are not mind readers. This is not a failing. It is a different operating system. Men operate from what has been directly said, what has been clearly asked, what has been plainly communicated. They do not naturally decode emotional subtext the way women do with each other. This is not emotional incompetence. It is simply different. What works is direct communication. Tell him what you need, not through hints or emotional weather changes or the withdrawal of warmth he has to decode. Say it plainly. If he does not respond immediately, say it again without the accumulated resentment of all the times you felt he should have known. Women claim to be great communicators. In many contexts, that is true. But communicating with men requires a directness that most women resist because it feels unromantic. Because they believe love should mean he just knows. Love does not produce mind reading. Communication produces understanding. Get direct. It will change your marriage faster than anything else on this list. The second way is disrespecting him and wondering why the marriage is dying. If there is one thing above all others that kills a man's investment in a marriage, it is disrespect. Not dramatically, not in one catastrophic moment, but steadily through the accumulated weight of small disrespectful behaviors that over time destroy something in him that cannot be rebuilt. Disrespect does not always look like obvious contempt. It looks like rolling your eyes when he speaks. It looks like correcting him in front of other people. It looks like dismissing his opinions before he has finished expressing them. It looks like nagging delivered with an undertone of his inadequacy. It looks like suggesting through words or tone that he is not doing enough, not smart enough, not capable enough, not man enough. Here is what you need to understand about what that does to a man. When you disrespect your husband, you have essentially begun the divorce process. Not officially, not legally, but emotionally and psychologically. Because a man who is chronically disrespected by the woman he married does not gradually become more motivated to please her. He gradually disconnects. He stops bringing himself fully to the relationship. He stops sharing his thoughts because they will be dismissed. He stops making efforts because they will be criticized. He stops feeling love because he no longer feels safe to be vulnerable with someone who diminishes him. Respect is not optional in a marriage with a man. It is the oxygen the relationship breathes. Remove it and the relationship suffocates. Slowly, sometimes over years, but always inevitably. The men who walk out of marriages or who emotionally check out years before anything official happens, the vast majority of them will tell you the same thing if you ask them honestly. She stopped respecting me. She made me feel like a failure in my own home. She made me feel like nothing I did was ever enough. Find your way back to the genuine respect you had for him when you chose him. You chose this man. His qualities are still there even if the daily friction of marriage has obscured them. When you give a man genuine respect, he will move mountains to keep you happy. Disrespect him and you lose him by degrees until there is nothing left to lose. The third way is withdrawing intimacy and calling it normal. Men are physical and visual by nature. This is not a character flaw or evidence of emotional shallowness. It is simply true. For men, intimacy is not separate from emotional connection. It is how emotional connection is expressed and maintained. When a man is physically intimate with his wife, he feels bonded, valued, chosen, loved. When that intimacy is withdrawn, he does not just feel frustrated sexually. He feels rejected as a person. He feels unloved. He feels like he is being punished without knowing the crime. What too many women do not grasp is the long-term consequence of using intimacy as leverage. When physical connection becomes conditional on her mood, conditional on whether all her needs have been fully met, conditional on whether she is currently happy with him, it stops being intimacy and becomes a performance review. And no man sustains his emotional investment in a relationship where the most fundamental expression of love has been turned into a reward system he might or might not qualify for on any given day. Here is the harder truth. When intimacy disappears from a marriage or becomes a reluctant obligation performed without genuine engagement, that man is already half gone emotionally. He may stay. He may continue providing and showing up and maintaining the external structure of the marriage. But the connection that makes a marriage feel like a marriage is dying, and if that continues long enough, it dies completely. Prioritize physical intimacy in your marriage, not as a duty, not as something to be gotten through, but as a genuine investment in the health of a relationship you chose. Do not wait for him to initiate every time. The repeated experience of being the only one who pursues intimacy tells him something about his desirability and your investment that erodes his confidence and his connection to you over time. Your husband knows the difference between presence and absence in intimacy, and that difference matters more to the health of your marriage than almost anything else on this list. The fourth way is making him feel useless and then wondering why he has checked out. Men are built around purpose. This is not socialized behavior that can be unlearned. It is fundamental to how men are constituted psychologically. A man needs to feel useful, needed, capable of providing and contributing and solving. When he feels he has purpose and that his purpose is valued, he thrives. When he feels purposeless, or when his contributions go unacknowledged or are actively dismissed, something in him begins to collapse. In marriages that are deteriorating, there is a pattern that plays out with remarkable consistency. The woman becomes increasingly critical of how he does things, increasingly confident in her own way of handling everything, increasingly likely to take over tasks he was responsible for because he was not doing them exactly right. And the cumulative effect is a man who has been steadily pushed out of every meaningful role in his own home. He puts together the furniture and she tells him he did it wrong. He makes dinner and she points out what should have been different. He handles a situation with the children and she corrects his approach. None of these individually is catastrophic, but the pattern they create, the pattern of a man who cannot do anything right by the woman he shares his life with, is devastating to the sense of purpose that men require to stay engaged in a relationship. A man who feels that way in his own home does not become more engaged. He retreats. He stops trying because trying only produces more criticism. He finds his purpose elsewhere. And gradually the marriage becomes simply a logistical arrangement he maintains rather than a relationship he is genuinely invested in. Let him do things his way, even when his way is different from yours. The outcome of most domestic tasks is not so critical that it justifies the relationship damage done by constant correction. Let him contribute and acknowledge that contribution genuinely. A man who feels his efforts are seen and valued will invest more, not less. And a man who feels needed and capable in his own home is a man who wants to stay in it. The fifth way is misreading his emotional processing and taking it personally. Men manage their emotions through compartmentalization. When something is happening, a crisis, an argument, a difficult situation, a man's instinct is to set the emotion aside, stay focused on what needs to be done, and process the emotional dimension separately and privately afterward. This is not emotional avoidance. It is not evidence that he does not care. It is a deeply wired male response that serves men well in every environment requiring clear-headed function under pressure. What women often experience in those moments is abandonment. She is feeling something intensely. She wants him to feel it with her. And instead, he is calm, practical, solutions-oriented. And she interprets that calm as evidence that he does not understand the gravity of the situation, does not feel what she feels, does not love her the way she thought he did. This interpretation is almost always wrong, and the conflict it generates is almost always unnecessary. Men feel everything you feel. They simply do not express it in the moment you want them to. They are holding it internally, managing it, and they will process it when the immediate situation has been handled. Demanding that he match your emotional expression in real time is asking him to override a fundamental aspect of how he is wired in order to make you feel heard. When you need him to listen without solving, tell him that explicitly. He can do it, he will do it, but he needs the instruction because his default is to help by finding solutions. Meet his emotional processing style with curiosity instead of criticism. Understand that his calm in the storm is one of the most valuable things he brings to your life together. The sixth way is trying to control everything and calling it caring. There is a particular pattern in deteriorating marriages that has become almost a cliche. The controlling wife, the woman who has a vision for exactly how the household should run, how decisions should be made, how he should spend his time, how he should behave, what he should wear, how he should parent. The woman who has essentially decided that her way of doing and being is the standard against which everything in the marriage should be measured, and that her job is to bring him into compliance with that standard. Women who do this rarely experience themselves as controlling. They experience themselves as organized, as caring, as simply trying to maintain the home and family the way they need to be maintained. But from his perspective, it is the experience of living under perpetual management, of never being trusted to handle anything without oversight, of being treated not as a partner, but as an employee who is chronically underperforming. This pattern does not just create friction, it emasculates, it communicates in every interaction. I do not trust you. I do not respect your judgment. I do not see you as my equal in this partnership. And a man who lives under that dynamic for long enough either rebels dramatically or simply collapses inward and becomes the passive, disengaged, hollow version of himself that women then complain about. The irony is that controlling behavior produces exactly the outcome it is trying to prevent. She controls because she does not trust him. Her control makes him less invested. His disengagement confirms her belief that she needs to control everything. The cycle tightens until there is no partnership left at all. Genuine partnership requires trust. Trust requires tolerating the uncertainty that he might do things differently than you would. Your marriage will not survive long-term under a dynamic of control. The standard of living you are so worried about protecting is far more at risk from a marriage destroyed by control than from a marriage where the dishwasher gets loaded differently than you prefer. The seventh way is having a fantasy vision of marriage and punishing him for reality. Women approach marriage with an extraordinarily detailed vision of what it should look like, how it should feel, how he should behave, how the relationship should progress, how their emotional life together should unfold. This vision has been shaped by decades of cultural input, films, romance culture, social media, and the curated presentations of other people's relationships. And it is rarely anchored in the actual complexity and compromise and ordinariness of what long-term partnership between two real people actually involves. When reality does not match the vision, and it never fully matches for anyone, many women do not adjust the vision. They conclude that something is wrong with him, with the marriage, with the choice they made. They feel cheated. They feel that the gap between imagination and reality represents a failure that someone needs to be held accountable for. And the person most available to be blamed for their disappointment is him. This is how good marriages get dismantled. Not because anything is actually wrong, but because what actually exists, a real man with real limitations and real strengths living a real life alongside her, does not match the cinematic version of what marriage was supposed to be. And rather than recognizing the vision as unrealistic and finding genuine value in the reality she has, she pursues the fantasy through dissatisfaction, through pressure, through ultimatums, through eventually leaving in search of something that will finally feel the way she imagined it should. And she discovers, often after it is too late, that the vision was never available, that the man she left, who was real and present and trying and loyal, was worth more than the fantasy that consumed the marriage. Let me close by returning to where we began. The women who are struggling financially and emotionally in their 50s after divorce, the women who are alone in ways they did not anticipate, who have discovered that the standard of living they left behind was not replicated on the other side, who have quietly wished they had handled things differently. Most of them encountered at least several of the patterns I have described today. Most of them, if they are honest, can trace the deterioration of their marriages to behaviors they had the power to change but did not. This is not about blame, it is about clarity. Marriages do not usually die from one catastrophic event. They die from the slow accumulation of disrespect, disconnection, control, unmet expectations, and withdrawn intimacy that builds over years until there is nothing left to save. And the man you married, if he was a good man, a loyal man, a man who committed with the intention of staying, that man was worth more than most women recognize until they are standing on the other side of a decision they cannot reverse. The one variable you actually control in any relationship is yourself. Make the changes before it is too late, because the other side is not what the fantasy promised. Drop a comment. Men, tell me which of these patterns you have lived through, and whether anyone in your life ever had the honesty to name it to your face. Subscribe to Still Point Institute. Every week we have the honest conversations that no one else in this space is willing to have.